Chapter 61. Life Hanging on a Grass Rope. The bright morning sun shone on Qingmao Mountain. In the academy, the elder spoke about important details. Tomorrow, we are choosing the second goo worm for refinement. Everyone here has experience in successfully refining goo worms, and this time you can solidify your experiences. For the selection of the second goo worm, consider it carefully. With the experience of cultivating these few days and understanding of your own body, consider it as a whole. Normally, it is best if you pair the second goo well with your vital goo. A goo master's first goo was known as the vital goo, and once it was chosen, it would be the footing stone of their development. After that, the second and third goo worm would be nurtured upon this footing stone and decide the goo master's cultivating direction. After hearing the academy elder's words, the youngsters began to ponder, and only Fang Yuan was sleeping soundly on the table. He had worked hard for half the night yesterday, and after returning to the hostel, he still continued in his goo master cultivation, nurturing his aperture. When the sun had risen, only then did he sleep. The academy elder looked at Fang Yuan and frowned, but did not say anything. Ever since the clan leader spoke to him, he had adopted a let Fang Yuan do as he wishes. I am not going to give a care attitude. Which goo worm should I choose? As the students thought about it, they subconsciously looked towards Fang Yuan. Speaking of which, Fang Yuan already has his second goo worm. Yeah, that is but a liquor worm. To actually get a liquor worm out of gambling rocks, his luck is off the charts. If I had the liquor worm, I would advance to middle stage first too, huh? The students' thoughts varied, having admirers and jealous people among them. Ever since that day after the interrogation, Fang Yuan's liquor worm was successfully exposed. The origins of the liquor worm did not raise suspicion. The clansmen were both enlightened and also exasperated at Fang Yuan's luck. Why don't I have such luck, sigh? Guyu Chi-chung, who was also a C-grade talent, sighed deeply in his heart. Quite a while ago, his grandfather had asked around and tried to procure a liquor worm for him. To think that even as a family branch's inheritor, he was not able to have one. To think Fang Yuan managed to get the liquor worm before him. Compared to Qi Cheng's envy and depression, Vice Chairman Fang Zheng was full of spirit. Brother, I will definitely surpass you. He looked at Fang Yuan and said in his heart before looking away. These days his eyes were shining with light, and he felt a sort of excitement towards life. His face was flushing red and his forehead was glowing. Even his steps were quicker and lighter. The academy elder saw all of it, and immediately understood that the Guyu clan leader had started secretly teaching Fang Zheng. These underhand methods were obviously not for the public to know. The academy elder turned a blind eye to this. Soon it was night once more. Fang Yuan entered the secret cave again. Ring, ring, ring. In his hand, a wild rabbit was struggling, and there was a bell was on its neck. This was a wild rabbit that Fang Yuan caught on the mountain. The bell was naturally attached by him. After a day, the stuffy smell in the secret cave has dissipated, and the air was fresh. The cave's passage entrance was open. It was silent inside. Fang Yuan half-kneeled on the floor as he inspected the floor. Yesterday he had sprayed rock powder all over the area, and this thin layer of powder was inconspicuous. The passage entrance's rock powder is intact, thus it seems that during my absence, nothing strange has crawled out of it. The rock crack entrance does have a footprint, but that's mine, so evidently no one else had come here. Fang Yuan felt at ease after his inspection that he stood up, using his hands to pull the dead vines from the wall. Next he sat on the ground and his leg was used to hold the wild rabbit in place, leaving his two hands free to weave the vines. This was work that normal goo masters wouldn't know, but Fang Yuan had too much life experience. In his past life, many a time was he so poor that he couldn't afford to feed his goo worms, leaving them to starve to death one by one. For a time, he had primeval essence but no goo worms. He became just like a mortal person. Even living was difficult. Having no choice, he learned to weave the grass ropes into straw sandals, hats, etc., and sold them in exchange for primeval stone fragments to feed himself. While twisting the grass ropes in his hands, Fang Yuan's memories resurfaced. The anguish and suffering from back then had transformed into his soundless laughter now. The rabbit underneath his foot continued to struggle, the bell ringing non-stop, that a pair of two strings touch for long. 10,000s of twists and thousands of returns make their inseparable love numerous. 1. delicately and slowly, with the passing of years, letting them converge. Complications, entanglements, and turns present, weaving the grass ropes. Isn't it just like experiencing life? In the secret cave, the red light shone onto Fang Yuan's face, showing his youthfulness and experience intertwining together on his face. Time seemed to have stopped too, silently appreciating the young man weaving his ropes. Ring, ring, ring. An hour later, the wild rabbit rapidly entered the passageway, the bell on its neck ringing continuously. In a few breaths, it left Fang Yuan's field of vision. Fang Yuan held onto the improvised grass rope that he wove temporarily, and on one end the rope was attached to the rabbit's hind leg, dragging into the tunnel with it. After a while, the rope stopped all movement, but this did not mean the rabbit had reached the end of the tunnel. It could have been killed by a trap or just decided to take a rest midway. Fang Yuan began to pull at the rope, retrieving it. The rope gradually tightened as he tugged on the other end. A force of strength suddenly tugged back as the rope started to move towards the cave again. Evidently, the rabbit on the other side had felt the tugging force and, in its fluster, started to move deeper into the cave. After many attempts, the rabbit finally reached the end of the path, and no matter how Fang Yuan tugged at the rope, it only tightened and relaxed. Maybe the rabbit had reached the end of the tunnel, or maybe it had fallen into a trap and got stuck. It was simple to test and find out the answer. Fang Yuan started to retrieve the rope. His strength surpassed the rabbit by a mile, and eventually he dragged the rabbit out by force. The rabbit struggled at the other end, but the rope was made from materials acquired from the wine sack flour goo and rice pouch grass goo. Although it had been dead for years, it remained sturdy unlike normal grass. The wild rabbit was once again in Fang Yuan's hands, jumping about. Fang Yuan inspected the wild rabbit and saw that it had no injuries. Then he finally breathed out in relief. For now, it seems that this segment of the passageway is safe. With this result, the rabbit thus lost its value and Fang Yuan killed it instantly. Throwing the corpse on the ground, he could not let the rabbit go, for animals also had memories. If it came back again, and like the liquor worm, attracted outsiders, that would be very bad. He breathed in deeply. After several tries and probes, he finally stepped into the passageway carefully. Even with the wild rabbit exploring, there were many traps and mechanisms that specially targeted only humans. A small animal like the wild rabbit would be unable to trigger it. Thus, Fang Yuan still had to be careful. The tunnel was straight, diagonally slanting towards the bottom. The deeper it was, the wider and taller the passage became. Fang Yuan had to lower his head when entering at first, but after more than 50 steps, he was able to take large strides with a straightened back, and after 100 steps, he could walk while lifting his upper arms and brandishing them left and right. The tunnel was not that long. It was only around 300 meters. But Fang Yuan spent around 2 hours venturing before he finally reached the end of the path. On the way, he was vigilant and explored step by step. At the end of the path, he was already sweating profusely. It is so troublesome without a detection goo worm. Fang Yuan wiped the sweat off his forehead and, after confirming his safety, calmed down and inspected the area. This time at one glance, he was stunned. At the end of the tunnel, there was a huge rock. The rock's surface was smooth and protruded towards Fang Yuan's direction, resembling Jiafu's belly. This rock alone halted Fang Yuan's progression. Other than this huge rock, there was nothing around Fang Yuan. Is it because of an accident that the tunnel path was blocked, causing this? Fang Yuan squinted as he thought about the possibilities. Before the flower wine monk died, he was eager to set up the inheritance. He used the 1,000-li earthwolf spider and created a tunnel path. The path led deep within the mountains and to guide the inheritor in. After hundreds of years, the passage was unable to withstand the corrosion of time, and at one point, one of the areas collapsed due to lack of maintenance. All sorts of accidents often happen in life. If this is the case, won't I be stuck at this point? He went forward and touched the rock. This rock was halting his progression. Its size was like a door. One could only imagine its overall thickness. Fang Yuan could use the moonlight goo to carve away at the rock wall. But if he wanted to grind off this huge rock, it would take at least a year or two. It seems like I'm forced to use tools. I'll need to use spades and pickaxes to break the rock. Except if I do this, I might reveal some traces. The construction sounds might also travel out. Thinking of this, Fang Yuan frowned deeply. He was weighing the pros and cons. If the risk was too huge, he would rather give up this strength inheritance. After all, if others found out this secret, all the plotting and acting that Fang Yuan had done would go to waste, and his life would even be in danger. 1. Seems to be a line from a poem. Chapter 62. Choosing Gu again in the Gu storage room. The sun rises, signifying the arrival of another day. The students lined up properly, faces flushed with excitement as they stood before the Academy Gu storage room. Today was the day where they would pick their second Gu. As the first to advance to middle stage, Fang Yuan had the priority in choosing. Thus he stood at the front of the queue. Behind him was Gu Yu Mo Chun, Gu Yu Fang Zheng, and Gu Yu Chi Chung Creek. The Gu storage room's door was opened by the guards, and Fang Yuan was the first to set foot into it. The Gu room was not big, but was a sight to behold. The surrounding walls had square holes in them. Some were big, but others were small, holding all sorts of containers in them. There was rock pots, jade pots, cages made of weaved grass, and some porcelainware. All sorts of Gu worms, being all rank 1, were stored in these containers. The Academy probably spent more than 1,000 primeval stones every day just to feed these Gu worms. Fang Yuan glanced through and found that in many containers, they were already empty, having no Gu worms inside. The Gu worms in the storage room were replenished once a year. Previously, when they were choosing their vital Gu, most of the youngsters chose the Moonlight Gu. Thus, the storage room had no Moonlight Gu left at the moment. The storage room had no windows. There was only a small skylight at the rooftop. The sunlight shone in from the skylight and formed a rectangular golden image on the ground. The first time, when he entered the Gu room, Fang Yuan already had an objective and chose the Moonlight Gu immediately. But now, he had several possible targets in his mind. Yet these targets also depended on whether there was stock in the storage room. Fang Yuan moved along the left wall and strolled inside slowly while examining the catalog. 5 steps later, he paused at a square box frame near his shoulder had a bronze bowl inside, and within it was a Gu worm. This Gu worm was like a bedbug, flat and wide with a small head, having an oval body. It was yellow-orange throughout and emitted a faint bronze-like glow. This was the bronze skin Gu, the choice for most close combat Gu masters. The Academy's martial arts instructor raised such a Gu, and once activated, causes the body to glow yellow, greatly raising defense. Fang Yuan's knowledge was deep and broad, so of course he did not have any urge for this Gu. He continued forward and saw a stone skin Gu. The stone skin Gu and bronze skin Gu were similar in appearance, but the stone skin Gu's body was gray instead, like an art piece made of rock. After 6 stone skin Gu, there was the iron skin Gu. Iron skin Gu and bronze skin Gu were outwardly similar, but with only a tiny difference. It was silently staying in an iron bowl, unmoving. It emitted a black iron-like glow around its body. As humans have clans, so do Gu. The 3 Gu that Fang Yuan saw simultaneously were all from the same series. They were similar in appearance and had similar effects. Iron skin, bronze skin, rock skin, jade skin Gu. If there is a jade skin Gu, I might as well choose it. Fang Yuan mumbled as his heart felt a tiny flicker of expectation rising, and he continued walking. However, he was destined to be disappointed, for after the iron skin Gu, he saw the beast skin Gu. The jade skin Gu and beast skin Gu belonged to the same series as the bronze skin Gu, etc. But they had great difference in value. The beast skin Gu was the most common, even cheaper than the rock skin Gu, but it had more evolutionary lines and could fuse with more varieties of Gu. The jade skin Gu was the most rare Gu in this series. Its market value was only second to the liquor worm, and at times the price would fluctuate and rival with the liquor worm itself. Fang Yuan took a look, but he did not find a jade skin Gu. He was not disappointed, but laughed in relief. Guyu Village is just a middle-sized clan. The Academy Gu storage room is only of middle-tier quality. To have a jade skin Gu, that is rather impossible. The left side of the wall had already been inspected, so Fang Yuan swapped to another wall and continued strolling. On this wall, there was mostly the Longhorn Beetle Gu. Similar to the Skin Gu series, Longhorn Beetle Gu was a large clan among the rank 1 Gu worms. Their outer appearances were similar. They had long and circular cylinder figures, the back area having many outlines. A large part of the body was a black color, giving out a metallic luster. It had a pair of feelers that were long and exceeded the body size. Its chin was strong, and it gave out screeching noises, like the sound of timber being sawed. With this, a few goo masters from some places would call them as this sawing tree bunch. What first entered Fang Yuan's vision was a brute force longhorn beetle goo. Its entire body was a red metallic color, and it had a pair of antennae that was coarser than the usual longhorn beetle ones. On the top surface of the antenna, there was a bamboo joint-like growth with every small interval. This brute force longhorn beetle goo was highly sought after in the market. Earlier, the caravan that came to the Guyu village had people who sold large numbers of this goo. The brute force longhorn beetle goo gave goo masters temporary super strength. It had the reputation of the strength of one bull and could sustain for 5 breaths. But it had 2 weaknesses. Point 1 was that every activation consumed too much primeval essence. Rank 1 middle stage required 10% primeval essence, but if converted to initial stage, it would consume 20%. Another was sequela. If the goo master had a weak constitution, using this goo a lot would cause their muscles to get injured, even experiencing muscle tearing. Only goo masters with a strong body would choose to use this goo. A small-sized person like Fang Yuan was unsuitable for it. Fang Yuan knew this too, and walked past the brute force longhorn beetle goo, continuing to look around. Oh, this is not bad. He halted his steps. It was a yellow camel longhorn beetle goo. The beetle's figure was a tiny bit thinner and longer than the brute force longhorn beetle goo, the entire body coated in dark yellow color. Its pair of long feelers did not have bamboo joints, and the roots were yellow in color, slowly fading into black at the tip. The brute force longhorn beetle goo could grant a goo master temporary strength, and this type of strength was immediate, only lasting for 5 breaths. But the yellow camel longhorn beetle goo could grant the goo master durability and allow their stamina expenditure to be greatly reduced. However, it could only sustain for 15 minutes. At the same time, it had no repercussions. Among the rank 1 goo worms, the yellow camel longhorn beetle had high market value, comparable to the moonlight goo and only losing to the jade skin goo and liquor worm. Fang Yuan inspected the surroundings and found that there was only 1 yellow camel longhorn beetle. The goo is not bad, but it is not compatible with me. Fang Yuan shook his head, giving up this goo. Very quickly he walked and reached the corner of the wall, having finished looking at the second wall, but he was not satisfied. The goo in the storage room were only of this quality, and if he wanted to get lucky or get a surprise goo, the chances were slim. Fang Yuan turned to the third wall and continued inspecting. On this wall, the boar goo were dominant. Boar goo was a series among the goo wormed. There's the flower boar goo, pink boar goo, black boar goo, and white boar goo. Pink boar goo had the least value. Almost no goo masters chose them. It only had one ability, and that is to gain weight. After a goo master injects their primeval essence, the pink boar goo would change their constitution and cause them to get fat. No matter how skinny they were, they would be able to become a big fat person. There was only 2 to 3 pink boar goo in the storage room, obviously of no nurturing value. The flower boar goo was the most abundant, having a dozen at least lining into a row. These goo worms had flower patterns on the surface, either white and black, black and pink, or white and pink. There were even some that had all 3 colors. The flower boar goo's use was similar to the brute force longhorn beetle goo, temporarily adding strength to the goo master. The brute force longhorn beetle goo gave 1 bull strength, and the flower boar goo gave 1 boar strength. The flower boar goo spent the same amount of primeval essence as the brute force longhorn beetle goo, but could sustain for 10 breaths, twice of the brute force longhorn beetle goo. This was because the goo master gained lesser strength, thus lesser side effects. The flower boar goo is the most common goo worm, and it is sold most abundantly in the market. Its price is half of the brute force longhorn beetle goo, truly value for money. But among the boar goo clan, only those 2 last goo has greater value, being even more expensive than the jade skin goo and liquor worm. Fang Yuan's eyes showed a light of deep thoughts that a black boar goo or a white boar goo could sell for 600 primeval stones in the market. Once it appeared, it was often sold immediately. The black and white boar goo's ability was to change the goo master's body constitution and raise their strength permanently. Although the brute force longhorn beetle could grant a bull's strength, it could only last 5 breaths, uses too much energy to sustain, and had strong after effects. The black and white boar's strength increment, although little at a time, would be accumulative over time, and once obtained, the strength would belong to the goo. Master Holy. Even if the goo dies, this strength will still remain on the goo master's body. This is the reason why the black and white boar goo's value is higher than the liquor worm. The public recognizes that the liquor worm's value should be slightly inferior to the black or white boar goo. The liquor worm can only refine primeval essence, and after an intense battle, a goo master's primeval essence is easily depleted. For the remainder of the battle, they can only rely on their martial arts and their physical strength. This is when the white and black goo show their worth. They are more reliable than the liquor worm. If I can refine a black boar goo or white boar goo, that would be good. Fang Yuan was just imagining the scenario, but with this type of goo storage room, which only has one yellow camel longhorn beetle, how can there be white or black boar goo which are so rare? He walked another round and saw all the goo worms the room had to offer. As expected, there was nothing that truly captivated him. At last, he retrieved a little light goo at a corner of the wall. There were 5 little light goo in the storage room. This goo was oddly shaped, looking like a pentagram, and only half as large as a fingernail. The little light goo was mainly paired with the moonlight goo, a common assistance type goo worm for the moonlight goo. To Fang Yuan had chosen this goo, it was merely an average option, but at least it suited his development path. Fang Yuan is out. Geez, finally out after so long. I wonder what goo he chose. He already has the liquor worm. This is his 3rd goo. Maybe he won't be able to raise them properly. Hee. Fang Yuan leisurely walked out of the storage room. The students were outside for such a long time and had started to become restless. It's my turn. I wonder what goo has Fang Yuan chosen. Once Guyu Imo-chun saw Fang Yuan stepping out, he hurriedly took big steps and entered the storage room. He checked and found that the sole yellow camel longhorn beetle was still there. Imo-chun could not refrain from becoming overjoyed, immediately taking it away. Afterwards, Fang Zheng went in. I have the moonlight goo for offense, but I lack a defensive type goo worm. Guyu Fang Zheng, after long consideration, decided to choose a bronze skin Gu. Guyu Chi Chung was the 4th to enter. I need an evasion ability, so in future battles I will be able to hit others, but others cannot hit me. I'll be virtually unbeatable. He looked left and right, and finally chose a dragon pill cricket goo. Chapter 63. Gifting the jade skin under the moon. White boar hidden in the ground flower. The sun lowers and the moon rises, the signal of the arrival of nightfall. This was one of the concealed courtyards in the Guyu village, a locust tree that stood with complicated branches and luxuriant leaves, its robust and spacious treetop, that was like a jasper imperial canopy, enveloped the entire courtyard. The moonlight was gentle like water, traveling through the leaves and branches of the locust tree, spilling into the courtyard. A gust of wind blew over, sending the tree leaves rustling. The shadows of the tree swaying slightly. It was under this tree that 2 people stood. Jiu Bo used a gentle gaze and looked at Fang Zheng. Fang Zheng, today you chose your 2nd goo. I wonder what it is. Reporting to clan leader, sir. Today I chose a bronze skin goo. Guyu Fang Zheng stood rigid, saying with a look of admiration. Jiu Bo nodded, and after pondering he replied, not bad. It is a good choice. Guyu Fang Zheng stood before Guyu Bo, his body tensed and tightened. Hearing Guyu Bo's praise, he did not know how to reply for a while, so in the end he only laughed. Clan leader, I chose randomly. You think I'm not serious in praising you? No. Guyu Bo stared at Fang Zheng, a smile on his face. Do you know? From choosing a goo, it shows a person's disposition. You chose the bronze skin goo for defense. Paired with the moonlight goo, it is both offense and defense. This shows your pure nature. In this world, offense and defense are like frontal and ambush, yin and yang, soft and hard. This is the king's path. Guyu Mo Bei chose the yellow camel longhorn beetle. This goo grants stamina and allows him to sustain battle. This shows his stubborn and strong attitude. As for Guyu Chi Chung, he chose the dragon pill cricket goo, allowing him to increase his dodging ability. This shows he does not like frontal attacks, being a witty person, good at tactics, but also showed the weakness in his character. Guyu Fang Zheng was stunned after listening, for he did not expect that such a simple matter could reveal that much information and logic. Consequently, his attitude towards Gu Yubo became even more respectful. Clan leader, what did my brother choose? Fang Zheng thought of Fang Yuan and immediately asked that Gu Yubo laughed. He chose the little light Gu. This Gu is used to assist the moonlight Gu and can make the moonblade attack stronger. This shows his extreme, active, and invasive personality. Indeed, Big Brother seems to be like that. Fang Zheng muttered. Ji Yubo took Fang Zheng's expression into consideration and etched it into his mind. Those who were rulers had their unique ability. Although Gu Yubo and Fang Zheng did not interact for long, Gu Yubo's experienced gaze had already seen through Fang Zheng. Him telling Fang Zheng about Mo Bei and Qi Cheng's decisions had deeper meaning. It was to help Fang Zheng analyze these two people, for he anticipated him defeating the two of them and establishing the role of clan leader with his great talent. But Gu Yubo would not say it out loud and would not instigate Fang Zheng's actions as the clan leader. His every word and action had political implications. If he directly controlled Fang Zheng and dealt with Qi Cheng and Mo Bei, if word spread it might be misunderstood as the clan leader's political assault. If that's the case, the implication would be huge and it might even cause a clan dispute, harming the entire village. There was another point. Gu Yubo was waiting for Fang Zheng to understand his intentions. He spent time and effort to nurture Fang Zheng, but it was not to nurture a rank 4 or 5 fighter. A fighter without political knowledge was like a double-edged sword. He needed the future leader for the clan. I analyzed Mo Bei and Qi Cheng's personality for Fang Zheng, but he did not notice my intention, instead asking about Fang Yuan's situation. It seems that he has great trauma regarding Fang Yuan, but he is also at his rebellious stage. He wants to beat Fang Yuan. That's understandable. Sigh, if only Fang Zheng had Fang Yuan's intelligence. I've seen many youngsters these years, but when it comes to political wits, Fang Yuan tops them all. It is a pity he only has C-grade talent. Gu Yubo sighed internally, but his smile got even more gentled. He took out a Gu worm from his pocket. This is jade skin Gu? Fang Zheng, on seeing this Gu worm, said lightly with his eyes wide open. Ji Yubo said, compared to the bronze skin Gu, this jade skin Gu is much better, not only using less primeval essence, but also gives greater defense. Fang Zheng, do you want it? Clan leader. Fang Zheng was shocked, and he looked at Gu Yubo, stuttering. Of course I want it. I can give it to you. Gu Yubo laughed even more amicably. But as the clan leader, I have to be impartial and cannot give it to you for no reason. Thus, I have a condition. Fang Zheng nodded repeatedly, staring widely. What condition? Gu Yubo's smile vanished, showing a stern expression. I want you to be the first to break through rank 1 into rank 2. Be the first place in terms of cultivation. And this jade skin Gu is your advancement reward. Advanced to rank 2? Fang Zheng hesitated for a moment. He had just become rank 1 middle stage. After middle stage was upper stage, and after that there was still peak stage. But now Gu Yubo wanted him to be the first person to advance to rank 2. What's wrong? Are you afraid? Then I can only give this Gu to others. Gu Yubo pretended to keep the jade skin Gu. Fang Zheng was incited by this sentence. Immediately his brain heated up as he shouted, No, I promise you, I will defeat everyone and be the first rank 2 cultivator. That's the way. Gu Yubo showed his gentle smile again, placing the jade skin Gu on Fang Zheng's hand. That he thought in his heart, Fang Zheng, I know you feel inferior, but this inferiority complex is too harmful to your growth. The best way to dispel your inferiority is success. You have a great talent, so advancing to rank 2 first is your greatest advantage, and also the easiest success you can achieve. You must succeed, for if you fail even this, I would be too disappointed. At the same time, Fang Yuan stepped into the secret cave behind the rock crack again, getting into the end of the tunnel. This time, he did not bring any steel spade, pickaxe, or hammer, but carefully observed the surroundings. He was discouraged by this setback the previous night, and on the way back to the village he felt something amiss. Only today in the dormitory where he used the spring-autumn cicada to refine the little light, Gu, did he suddenly understand the weird part of this situation. This huge rock blocking my path is too round and smooth. This is definitely man-made. That is to say, the flower wine monk purposely set this to block the path. But why did he set this hurdle at such a place? Fang Yuan pondered. He looked at the surroundings again. The ground of the path was smooth and the top was curved. The walls on both sides were red soil, emitting a red light. When he looked at the ground again, he found a point of suspicion. The ground near the giant rock was slightly darker in color. This color difference was not very obvious and not easily found under such a dimly lit environment. Fang Yuan knelt down, touching the ground, feeling a sense of wetness. No wonder the color was darker. It was wet, but this path was so dry. Where was the water coming from? Fang Yuan grinded the soil with his fingers, finding out that the soil on this patch of earth had issues. It was very soft and loose, not lumpy like the dry red soil. Fang Yuan's gaze shone. Experience and intuition told him that this area had the key that the flower wine monk had hidden, and this key was the clue that would allow him to continue moving forward. Fang Yuan began to dig the soil. It was loose, so he did not spend much effort. After digging for around an inch deeper, there was a peculiar fragrance rushing into Fang Yuan's nostrils. This fragrance is thick and luxurious, yet not common. It seems delicate and elegant. Could it be? Fang Yuan's heart moved as he thought of a possibility, his hands moving even faster. While digging, the area under the soil suddenly emitted a faint dark gold light. It really is what I'm thinking of. Fang Yuan's eyes shone, his hand movement becoming more delicate, carefully digging the surrounding soil away, expanding this hole. After a while, a dark gold-colored flower bud that was buried under the ground appeared in front of him. It was 2 inches deep in the ground, around the size of a stone mill. The bud's surface delicate, and with the dark gold color, it appeared to be mysterious and elegant. It really is the earth treasury flower goo. Seeing this, Fang Yuan breathed out deeply. He was not eager in peeling away the flower petals, but took a rest on the ground instead, wiping the soil off his hands. Then he slowly stretched his hand and pried open the dark gold-colored petals. The earth treasury flower goo was like the combination of a lotus and kale. Its petals were tightly knitted together with numerous thick pieces, slippery when felt. As Fang Yuan opened the petals one by one, it was like revealing thick layers of silk. Once it left the main body, the huge dark gold-colored petals would disperse quickly. It was like snowflakes that melted into the air. After uncovering around 50 to 60 pieces of petals, the bud had shrunk in half, revealing the flower core. The core's petals were smaller and thinner, its texture becoming more smooth and fine. It was no longer like silk, but more like thin pieces of paper. Fang Yuan's movements became gentler and slower, only opening a piece of petal in a few breaths. The petals became increasingly transparent, and after a while, when Fang Yuan had opened the pieces of thin paper-like petals, he stopped his movements. The earth treasury flower goo at this moment only had a last layer of petals left. These petals overlapped each other, forming a fist-sized ball. The petals were translucent, thin as paper. Inside these petals contained a golden liquid, and in the middle of this liquid, a goo worm was sleeping inside. Fang Yuan looked intently, but he could only see a blurry shadow of the goo worm, and he could not tell which goo it was. He was close to it, and his breath was blown on the flower core. The spherical flower core began to shake, the golden liquid also moving gently inside the petals. That goo worms would die without food, and only a few goo worms could seal themselves. To protect and conserve goo worms, goo masters have had thought of many methods. The earth treasury flower goo was one of them. It was a one-time use type goo, and once implanted on the ground, it could not be moved. Its food was simple, which was earth energy. As long as it was planted on the ground, it would be able to survive with sufficient earth energy. It only had one use, and that is to contain a goo within the flower heart and immerse the goo in the golden liquid. This golden nectar could, to an extent, imitate the sealing state and let goo worms fall into hibernation. The flower wine monk planted this earth treasury flower goo, so the goo within has to be for the inheritor. Fang Yuan stretched out a finger and peeled the remaining petals carefully, revealing an opening. The golden liquid flowed out along his finger, feeling like soybean oil. The flower core began to soften with the loss of the golden liquid. Fang Yuan moved his finger and the petals were split, allowing him to retrieve the slumbering goo worm. It was a cute ladybug, only the size of the thumb's fingernail. Its body was a milky white color, and if overlooked from the back, it was like a circle. Its head only occupied a small area, while the rest of the body was its large, fat stomach and bright, shiny exoskeleton. Its 6 tiny limbs were also cream-colored, hidden under its stomach. White boar goo. Fang Yuan showed an expression of joy on his face. Chapter 64. Easy to do secretly, difficult to do openly. The temperature these few days had gotten higher. The sun shone intensely in the afternoon, hanging right over everyone's head. The caravan left, and the inn's business fell again. Fang Yuan stepped into the cafeteria, immediately attracting the attention of the shop assistants. The familiar face rushed over and gave him a flattering smile. "Oh, young master, you're here? Please take a seat. Give me a jar of wine, and cut me 600 g of beef, and serve a few side dishes." Fang Yuan strode through the cafeteria and approached the window seat that he always sat at. The shop assistant showed a difficult expression. "Young master, my apologies, but during the last time the caravan came, the innkeeper sold all of the green bamboo wine. We do not have this wine here anymore." Fang Yuan nodded, not feeling surprised. "Then give me a jar of rice wine and tell the innkeeper, brew more green bamboo wine this year. I am pre-ordering 100 jars. As for how much the advance payment will be, you can count first and report to me." Now that the liquor worm was exposed and did not gather any suspicion, Fang Yuan did not have to be restrained in buying wine anymore. "All right, I will definitely convey your words. Please be at ease, young master." The shop assistant patted his chest, sounding confident. Soon, the dishes were served. Fang Yuan drank and ate while staring out of the window in such hot weather, especially during meal times. There were few people on the streets. The sunlight shone on the ground and the green-colored bamboo tall houses that a few barefooted mortal farmers carrying cement, steel spades, or shoulder poles walked in front. They had just finished their farm work and were heading home. 2 children held the bamboo frame of their windmill toy and ran about. The one behind chased while crying and shouting. It seems that the boy in front had stolen his windmill toy. This moment, 2 young Gu masters wearing green belts walked hurriedly on the street. "Get lost. Don't block the way." A Gu master pushed the farmer in front of him. The farmers frantically gave way. "Humph." The 2 young Gu masters walked through arrogantly. Fang Yuan looked with a distracted gaze in his eyes, as part of his mind was already focused on his aperture. Within the aperture, the water wall continued to flow as his green copper primeval sea rose with raging waves. The liquor worm was playing around in his primeval sea, at times comfortably rolling around, and at times curling into a ball. The spring. Autumn cicada was in deep slumber, hiding its appearance. The round body of the white boar goo spread its wings and drew circles in the sky. The white and black boar goo were equally well known, both being precious and rare rank 1 goo worms. Their market value was even greater than the liquor worm. Although they had the same usage and similar appearance, their future advancement routes were greatly different. The black boar goo and the green silk goo would combine into the rank 2 black mane goo, and then into the rank 3 steel mane goo. But the white boar goo was most compatible with the jade skin goo, where it would turn into rank 2 white jade goo, and later into the rank 3 heavenly mugwort goo 1. The steel mane goo could let the goo master's hair become tough as steel, raising both offense and defense. The heavenly mugwort goo allowed the goo master's body to become tough as white jade, while at the same time reducing the damage from attacks such as the moonblade. Fang Yuan was slightly happy over this. Getting the white boar goo was just one aspect of it, but what made him truly happy was the flower wine monk's strength inheritance. The white boar goo can increase strength. The flower wine monk set a giant rock to block the way, so it seems I need to refine this goo and with enough strength, push the giant rock away and continue forward. This must be the first test. With the flower wine monk's meticulous setup, I can infer that there has to be future inheritance trials, a second or third hurdle. Most importantly, I can confirm that he set this strength inheritance not as a trap, but with true sincerity. With this inheritance, I can reach rank 3 faster and leave this Qing Mao mountain and venture outside, gaining greater opportunities. What does a Gu master need most in cultivating? The answer is but one word: resources. Fang Yuan needs to cultivate, thus he needs resources. But the clan's resources are limited, so if he wants more, he needs to fight for it. Not only fighting for resources, he also has to be victorious at TOM. The more he fights and the more victories he obtained, the more he would reveal more of his trump cards and make others more wary. Wariness, when accumulated to an extent, would turn into suppression and hurdles blocking his path. Fang Yuan killed a family servant. But why did the Mo family stay indifferent? Robbing the classmates, why did their family not pursue it? Fang Yuan resisted the clan and refused to be part of the system. But why did the clan leader choose to be lenient? It is all because he is weak, because he is C-grade. They feel strong and do not feel like bullying the weak. Under the family system, being petty with the weak Fang Yuan not only causes them to face humiliation, it also makes others feel that the person is cold and unfeeling, ruining one's social relationships. Weakness was a safety umbrella that Fang Yuan had for now. But with his continued competition for resources, Fang Yuan would appear stronger. This would make everyone start being wary of him and begin to try recruiting him. No matter which side he chooses, he would face suppression and troubles from the other factions. Suppression and restrictions would drag down his growing speed. Fang Yuan was aware of his predicament. He was in a delicate position. He seemed to have offended everyone, but he had not violated any law in reality. Yet with time, his cultivation level will rise, and conflicts will arise and worsen. Fang Yuan knows that this conflict would escalate, but the later it escalated, the greater benefit he would gain. Thus, the flower wine monk's inheritance was perfectly timed. With this strength inheritance, he would have hidden resources. Using this, he could be free of the system's control and walk his own path, cultivating at his own speed and secretly accumulate strength. Once he was adopted into the system, he would need to side with a faction. Even if he did not want to compete, he would definitely be dragged into the political strife. Inside the system, one is a pawn. You first have to be a proper pawn for others to use you willingly. After they trust and use you, you have the chance to climb upwards, and even during that process, you have to be careful not to become a discarded pawn. Fang Yuan was clear of this procedure. He knew it too well. Even with his vast knowledge, there was nothing he could do to this situation. These were the rules. The more crucial part was his C-grade talent. To the clan, there was no desire in investing in him. Often he would be treated as a discarded pawn. The most optimum progress route was to work alone. This way, he could avoid most competition. Towards the higher-ups in the village, the image he had created earlier would be sustained. This world's matters. It is always easily done secretly, but difficult to do openly. Using the flower wine monk's inheritance, I can cultivate and gather strength secretly without gaining attention and suppression. But the extortion has to continue, for if it stopped abruptly, it would invite suspicion, and I also need primeval stones. Fang Yuan considered his future plans that he really needed primeval stones. Other teenagers of his age had only started refining and feeding a second goo worm. He, however, had also refined the little light goo and recently acquired the white boar goo, thus having a total of 4 goo worms. Previously, he needed around 1 primeval stone a day just to feed the moonlight goo and liquor worm. Now, after calculating, he needed more than 2 pieces every day just as expenditure. If including his cultivating needs and living expenditures, he would need to use around 5 primeval stones a day. 5 primeval stones was enough to feed a family of 3 mortals for 5 months. On hand at the moment, he had several hundred primeval stones, but it was not enough to sustain such an expenditure in the long run. More importantly, the further he got, the greater his expenditure would be, especially after advancing to rank 2. Every time he tried combining goo worms, it would cost a huge sum. Thinking of this, Fang Yuan felt troubled. The matter of primeval stones was a problem, and by relying on just extortion and the resources on hand, he could only delay this problem from erupting. Moreover, he had another problem, and that was the white boar goo's feeding. The white boar goo's food was pork. Boar obviously referred to pigs. The boar goo series food was all pork. Black and white boar goo had huge appetites. Every 5 days they would need to eat around 1 fully grown pig's amount of meat. Pork in this world was not cheap, and mortals could only afford to slaughter one during the New Year celebration and enjoy themselves. Without the large-scale cultivation technique of Earth, the price of pork and beef was not something mortals could eat often. At the same time, the topography of the Qingmao Mountain was precipitous, the area of residence narrow. How much space could be allocated just for rearing livestock? You eat what you can procure it where you live, The villagers were able to eat pork occasionally because of the hunters hunting wild boars in the mountains. It seems that I have to go hunting myself from now on, for pork. Fang Yuan's eyes shone with a glint. Relying on the village to purchase pork, first was the expenditure of primeval stones, second was that it would attract attention. Even if you loved eating pork, how could a person eat so much in such a short period? If he hunted himself, it would not only resolve this problem, but also alleviate his current financial stress. Shop assistant bill. Thinking of this, Fang Yuan hesitated no more, and after footing the bill, he left the inn. These few days the academy was on break, so that the students could refine their second goo worm. Fang Yuan decided that he could use this time well. He would leave the village and scout the mountains, and then kill some wild boars and get himself some pork. 1. Mugwort. A kind of plant. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Artemisia_princeps. Chapter 65. Quickly get lost. The mountain forest was boundless, and Fang Yuan walked through patiently. The sunlight permeated through the huge and tall woods, shining and creating a ground of mottled and fragmentary tree shadows. The green grass beside his feet was like a mattress, and the wild flowers bloomed with bright colors. His ears picked up the sound of birds chirping, or the trickling of flowing water. The further he got from the village, walking towards the outer surroundings, the more risky it was. Thus Fang Yuan was even more careful. The wilderness was very dangerous. Goo masters had to have at least rank 3 cultivation to be able to venture the wilds alone and explore. But this did not mean they were safe, as many rank 3 goo masters died in the wild, sometimes even rank 4s. Wild beasts, poisonous worms, human threats, and at times the weather, these were all causes of death. However, Fang Yuan wanted to kill the wild boars which were often found around the village's peripheral. Otherwise, the village hunters would not be able to catch wild boars. The environment around the village, every now and then, goo masters from the clan would come out and clear the area. This environment to a rank 1 middle stage like me is still safe. But I still have to be careful. Wild beasts and goo worms like to move around. With his experience from his previous life, Fang Yuan scouted carefully. Time gradually passed, but Fang Yuan gained nothing. Damn, Qingmao Mountain is still too big for the current me. I have no scouting type goo, and I am not familiar with this environment. Plus Qingmao Mountain is periodically cleared up, so to find a wild boar, it is too difficult. Let's go to the foot of the mountain. Fang Yuan's scouting was unfruitful, thus he changed his mind and went to the mountain foot. Qingmao Mountain has 3 mountain villages. Gu Village, Xiong Family Village, and Bai Family Village. The Xiong Family Village was on the Fore Mountain, the Guyu Mountain Village was at the mountain waste, and Bai Family Village was at the back mountain waterfall. Other than the 3 villages, there was also tens of tiny villages at the mountain foot. All being inhabited by mortals, the 3 mountain villages split these small villages among themselves, being the ones controlling them behind the scenes. Once they lacked family servants, they would pick from these small villages, but they would not choose goo masters. Nurturing a goo master, they would only choose a clansman. Even if they knew that among these mortals were people with talent, although rare, they would still not use them. This world was heavily sided towards bloodline, and holding power among relatives was the political stability that the clan needed. In order to expand in size, many mountain villages had adopted outsiders into their system. Eventually, their power flowed out and caused internal conflicts, thus causing the entire clan to break down or weaken. No matter the world, political power was still based off military force. This is the truth, and troops are the brute force department, representing strength. By controlling strength, one gains status and authority. Of course, the clan's rules are not ever constant. They also adopt new blood. Every year, there would be outsiders marrying into the clan, leaving their servant status, and the children they give birth to would be a Guyu, a new generation clansman. This is like connecting a tiny stream into a spring. Do not underestimate this stream, as without it, a spring would be still and eventually rot. With it, there would be life, and the spring would grow even stronger. Fang Yuan's previous servant Shin Chui was bidding on this idea of marrying into a Guyu and leaving her servant status. Fang Yuan left the mountain, and after 30 minutes, could see thick smoke rising from under the mountain. After a while, he could see a wide hill in his vision, and a village around that area beside a small river. The small villages around the vicinity were under the rule of the Guyu village. Although they were close by, the small villages were not as safe, thus requiring regular cleanup. For mortals to live in such conditions and manage to survive, to Fang Yuan, he naturally could accept such a fact. Oh. On the mountain path nearing the village, Fang Yuan sensitively found traces on the ground. His past experience told him that this was a wild boar's traces. Chase. Fang Yuan raised his spirits as he followed the clues, getting deeper into the mountains. Green moss spread over the stones, ancient juniper trees and tall pagoda trees completing the great forest, under the strong light of the sun. The mountain woods of summer was even more profound and serene. The lush underbrush suddenly moved a little. A few deer eating the sumptuous grass looked up, vigilantly staring at the bushes, their ears twitching. The bushes that were half a man's height split apart, and a young man crawled out from within. His skin was pale and his black hair was short. He was wearing a modest linen shirt. It was Fang Yuan. Swooshed. A few wild deer were frightened, and their four thin limbs quickly moved, sprinting away. In a moment, they vanished from Fang Yuan's vision. These are female deer. Their fur can be shaved to make warm clothing, and deer meat is also some goo worm's food. If it's a male deer, the antlers are most precious, and some are even necessary ingredients for a goo worm's advancement. The wild was dangerous all over, and at the same time it had great treasures. Fang Yuan looked at the direction that they were escaping in, and retracted his gaze. His target was wild boars, not these deer. He continued moving. There was the sound of buzzing. Nearing these noises, Fang Yuan stopped in his tracks. Beehive. He looked forward and saw a beehive hanging on a tree. The bee's nest was massive. The size was that of a wicker basket. It appeared as a sort of grayish dark yellow color. Outside the bee nest was a few dozen bee soldiers flying around. Occasionally a few worker bees would enter and exit. Beehive has honey, and honey is the bear strength goo's food. Thus, the Xiong family has great demand for honey. This beehive is only a small-sized one, and the chances of producing a goo isn't high. If I had the bronze skin goo, I could risk getting stabbed and collect the honey. What a pity. Fang Yuan thought. In this world, not all insects are gu. Gu are the spirit of the world, the body of the laws. How can it be so cheap? Among a swarm of insects, normally only the insect king is a goo, but that depends on their size and development. So if the swarm is too small, there is no goo either. Taking the beehive ahead as an example, because it is too small, there is a low chance of having a goo. Fang Yuan routed around this beehive and continued forward. The traces of the wild boar was getting more evident, and Fang Yuan knew he was getting close to it. Thus he became more careful, as wild boars were very dangerous. Wild boars are not reared pig. When a mature wild boar fights with a tiger, the tiger may not win. In this mystical world, wild beasts are not simple too. Oh, this situation. When Fang Yuan finally found the wild boar, he saw that it had fallen into a huge pit. A sharpened green bamboo was situated at the bottom of the pit, where it had pierced the wild boar and was causing it to bleed. Seeing the accumulated blood in the pit, he could tell that the boar had already been in the trap for at least 15 minutes. But this wild boar continued to struggle, whimpering and howling, still full of life. This trap is obviously set by hunters. To think I'm reaping the rewards. Fang Yuan smiled, but his expression was grim. These traps threatened him too. If he had fallen into it, after half a quarter of an hour, he would die. Although the village surroundings were cleared regularly, the hunters often came to hunt and set many traps. Some could be discerned, while others were designed to be hidden, and if Fang Yuan could not discover them, he might fall into the trap. Any area in this mountain could have a trap buried by the hunters. But among hunters, with every trap set they would inform each other on the location. It seems I have to find an old hunter's residence and find out about the trap locations from him. Along with the surrounding wild beasts activity area and with these intel, I would not have to search like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Fang Yuan thought internally. This was the problem of not having a scouting type of goo worm. But to find a good scouting type goo, it was not easy. In a short time, he could barely make do with a hunter's intel. With such a thought, Fang Yuan's wrist flicked and a moon blade flew out, easily hitting the wild boar. Whoosh! With a light ring, the entire moon blade cut through the boar's neck and caused a long and slender wound. Then with a plop sound, a blood fountain spewed out from it. The spewing blood caused the wound to become bigger, and thus the blood fountain also enlarged. The boar screeched, thrashing about with the last of its energy, until its movements became smaller and smaller. Fang Yuan silently looked at the scene, his face calm. The wild boar's life faded as its eyes were staring wide and perfectly round, the muscles on its body twitching, and the warm blood filling the trap hole, a thick smell of blood, permeating the surrounding. Survival or death, this is the theme of nature. He sighed in his heart. At this point, human voices were heard. Second brother Wang, within our village, no one is better than you at hunting. Especially killing wild boars. Your family's old Wang is the hunting king in the entire region. Who would not know of his great name? That's right. Second brother Wang inherited the old hunter's abilities. To hunt a wild boar, it is naturally as good as caught. Second brother Wang, why didn't little sister Wang come with you today? After all the bootlicking, a grave and stern voice said, Humph. Hunting a wild boar. How can it show my true abilities? Today I want to kill 3 boars, you'll see. Ergo Dan, stop lusting after my sister, or I'll thrash you. Ergo Dan retorted, men and women marry when they're of age. What's wrong with liking little sister Wang? Moreover, I'm not the only one. Which guy in your village doesn't also fancy her too? Second brother Wang, in my opinion, you are also 19 already. You should marry a wife and have kids already. The voice spoke again. Humph. I'm a true blue man. How can I lust after such a small temptation? One day, I will leave this Qing Mao mountain and explore the world and learn about everything under the sky that will truly be fitting of my manly status. Saying so, the 4 young hunters walked out of the forest. The leader hunter had a tall build, carrying a bow and arrow, his muscles bulging and his eyes full of spirit, showing a powerful aura. When he saw Fang Yuan, he frowned and screamed, Which village are you from, kid? How dare you try to take advantage of me, Wang Air? Quickly get lost.